Hello my loves, Tony here from TL Yarn Crafts and welcome to another Yarn Snob Reviews. This one comes to us with love from our friends at Hobbii. I am so grateful that they sent me this giant box of yarns, but don't get it twisted, I will not be taking it easy on them, especially after being blinded by all of this metallic, good gracious. As always, I'll test each of these yarns, give you my first impressions, likes and dislikes, and I'll round out my review with a rating of 1 to 10 hooks. Now let's take a look at our first yarn. First up on the chopping block is Limonata, which is a strong contender for those who value sustainability. Limonata is made from 100% recycled fibers. Specifically, it's a blend of recycled cotton and polyester. Each 50-gram ball holds 147 yards of DK weight yarn, and it's gonna run you $5.99. You get to choose from 18 colors, which is a decent palette to start with, but there's so much room to grow. Seriously, what summer yarn only offers one shade of green? The yarn itself is a tubular tape yarn, and with this fiber makeup, it is ideal for the warmer months. My first impression while stitching with this yarn was ick, no, get it away from me, I do not like it. When I squished it while it was in the ball, it felt soft-ish, but then this plasticky, scratchy feeling comes out when you work with it. Now that's likely from the recycled polyester, which I've worked with before, and even though I was expecting this texture, it was still very unpleasant. On top of that, this yarn is really grippy. Even with the super smooth ebony wood hook I was using, I still had some issues getting the yarn to glide over the hook. In the future, I would definitely suggest using a metal hook with this yarn. Now, sustainability in craft is a huge conversation right now, so I have to acknowledge and respect what Hobbii is trying to do with this yarn. The use of recycled fibers aims to reduce the environmental impact of this craft and avoid contributing to landfill waste. The idea is that you can make something amazing and beautiful while still feeling good about it. Now, on the downside, recycled fibers in yarn is still a pretty young practice, so there's not a lot of data on how well these items hold up, especially after repeated washings. And speaking of washing, Hobbii recommends that Limonata be hand washed and laid to dry, which seems a little involved for a cotton-based yarn. I don't know, maybe it's just me and I'm being lazy, but I feel like cotton should be able to go into the washing machine. When the swatch was all done, I was still on the fence. I didn't really enjoy the stitching process, but I did like the look of the fabric, and you all have been asking me for ages to block my swatches, so today felt like a good day to start. I pinned my swatch face down and I let it air dry completely, and babes, when I unpinned this swatch, I fell right off of that fence and full on in love with this fabric. It was soft but still textured, and the drape is 100% better even with this thicker stitch. And for those reasons, I'm giving Limonata 6 out of 10 hooks with a little bit of wiggle room. Expand the color range, make it easier to care for, and soften it just a bit, and this could be a truly perfect yarn. It would be ideal for summer tops as well as face scrubbies and dish towels. I'd give this a try with my sunrise coasters to add some flair for a cute dinner party. Next we have Denim Breeze, another option for our sustainable stitchers. Now, Denim Breeze is a sport weight yarn made in part from recycled denim gathered from the fashion industry as well as secondhand. Now, these recycled jeans contribute to the 80% recycled cotton in this yarn, as well as the 5% other fibers, which include components like jean labels and sewing thread. Each 50-gram ball has 109 yards and costs $4.99. We get just 18 colors again, but this time they're more muted and lightly heathered. The strand is made from 3 individual plies that are twisted together. One of the first things I noticed about Denim Breeze is the texture. Now, this yarn just has a weird feel to it. It's soft but kind of scratchy at the same time. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of a thinner version of those classic kitchen cottons that are always forced on us crocheters. It's a unique texture and one that I'm not immediately drawn to. What I am drawn to is the look of these stitches. They are so uniform, and the stitch pattern texture is really pleasing to the eye. You know what it is? It kind of reminds me of one of my favorite thermal blankets, and maybe that's why I like it so much, or maybe I just need a nap. I don't know, whatever it is, I didn't want to stop crocheting. I already had my blocking supplies out, so this swatch went on the boards too, and I'm really glad that it did. Blocking totally transformed the texture of this little swatch. It still has some of that bite to it, but it is a lot softer, and the drape is truly out of this world. When choosing this yarn for a project, you'll have some decisions to make. If you need to maintain some stiffness and structure, go for smaller stitches and skip blocking. But for something that needs some drape, and shape, pick more open stitches, and steam block your finished piece. It's almost like you'll have 2 yarns in one, which is a big plus for Denim Breeze. This yarn pleasantly surprised me, so I'm giving it 7 out of 10 hooks. With that incredible drape, this yarn is begging to be worn. Look for lightweight tops, dresses, and boleros to squeeze in a few more days of summer. If you need an idea for your first Denim Breeze project, try a lightweight version of my Frankie Bucket hat. Say hello to Flash It, a little something sparkly if you're into that sort of thing. Flash It is a worsted weight yarn blend of viscose with strands of coordinating metallic fiber running throughout. Now the yarn comes in hardcore balls, meaning that they have a cardboard tube inside the center, and that's what the yarn is wrapped around. 50 grams is going to get you 98 yards, and it's going to set you back $8.30 each, which feels ever so slightly outrageous considering the limited color palette of just 13 shades. The yarn has a chain at construction, which is one of my favorite constructions, but that's about where my interest in this yarn ends. Every year, right around the start of the 4th quarter, yarn companies haul out the gaudiest, shiniest yarns, and Flash It is leading the charge. The biggest problem with yarns like this is that the developers sacrifice drape, texture, and quality to achieve this sparkly holiday aesthetic. In this case, it feels a bit like crocheting with a plastic grocery bag, but rougher, if that makes sense. Now the yarn is made up of 1 strand of viscose and 1 strand of metallic fiber. The problem here though is that the viscose behaves like cotton, keeping a cylindrical shape, while the metallic is flat with sharp, scratchy edges. Since the metallic is wider than the viscose, it overwhelms the yarn with a really unpleasant texture. One thing I didn't expect about this yarn is how stretchy it is. The ball band recommends a 7mm crochet hook, which is what I use for this sample, but it seems hard to believe that developers intended for the final stitches to be so widely spaced. This also makes me concerned about stitch memory, which is the ability of a fiber to spring back into place after stretching. Items made from this yarn are likely going to look worn relatively quickly. To avoid this, I would opt for a smaller hook and be extra careful when cleaning. Hand wash gently and then lay it flat to dry. Flash It is going to get a measly 3 out of 10 hooks for me. I'm always turned off by holiday themed yarns, especially when the look comes before every other aspect of building a great yarn. But even I can recognize that there is a time and a place for yarns just like Flash It in this market. It may be cute for a holiday garland or a basket, and it's a good choice for costumes or cosplay. Hobbii recommends this yarn for festive wearables, but I say stitch at your own risk. Are you ready for another novelty yarn? This one is Peacock. It's 100% polyester and oh so fluffy. Now this bulky weight yarn comes in 100 gram skeins, offering 71 yards for $7.10 each. The strand is made up of a crochet looking chain with the fluffy fibers sticking out of just one side. The fibers are densely constructed, ensuring that the final project has minimal holes. The whole palette is pretty limited with only 14 shades, but considering that this yarn is typically used for amigurumi, the classic colors are all represented. This yarn feels heavenly, like brand new teddy bear from the toy store soft, and that softness is complemented by a pretty enjoyable crochet process. Like many of these fluffy or furry yarns, you end up crocheting more by feel rather than by sight. You can't really see your stitches, there's just too much fluff going on. Instead, you use your fingertips to determine where the tops of the stitches are. I also like to count every stitch to make sure I'm on the right track, and the great thing about this yarn is that all that fluffiness hides any imperfections. At one point, I ended up with 1 stitch too many. I simply worked a single crochet decrease, and it was like the mistake never happened. My only qualms with this yarn is the recommended hook size and the limited color selection. On the first point, the swatch is very dense using the recommended 7mm crochet hook with single crochet stitches. But like any crochet project, the quote-unquote correct hook size depends on the type of fabric that you're trying to achieve. For accessories or home decor, I would bump that hook up to an 8mm or even a 9mm. But for dolls and plushies, the 7mm hook would likely work well as you want denser stitches to keep the stuffing inside. As for my second point on the color range, 14 colors is just not enough for a yarn like this. Hobbii recommends this for amigurumi and even clothing items, but where are all the colors? We've got a good start with a collection of neutrals and some softer colors, but I'm gonna need some bold primary colors and some risky brights and neons. There's just so much more that can be done with such a nice yarn. I know I'm just nitpicking here, so I'm gonna give Peacock 8 out of 10 hooks. It's not a groundbreaking yarn, but it is reasonably priced compared to other yarns on the market, and there is potential to expand the color palette. I'd also love if this was offered in a lighter weight, maybe even a DK. Now just imagine my Bliss braided ear warmer being made in Peacock. You might not be able to see the individual stitches, but it would be one eye-catching crown. And the last yarn on today's train wreck is Miss Sparkle. I suspect you know how I feel about this yarn, but we're gonna go through this together. Miss Sparkle is a category 5 bulky weight yarn. It's kind of a Franken yarn made up of acrylic, polyester, polyamide, viscose, and wool. Now for a whopping $8.30, you can get 76 yards of some of the weirdest yarn I have ever touched. The yarn is made up of 2 strands. One is a cord with fluffy fibers, while the other is a chain with metallic fiber. Each colorway was so wild that I asked Hobbii to send me one of each so I wouldn't have to experience this alone. Here are all 9 colorways. We've got silver, gold, rosé, icy blue, red, green, pink, dark blue, and black. At first glance, this yarn kind of reminded me of a Susuwatari if it was dressed up for a party. Please tell me you see it too. Now, I just don't get down with this extreme of a novelty yarn, so I didn't have high hopes for this one. Not only does it look odd, but the texture kind of makes my skin crawl. The fuzzy part of this feels like fiber fill and just not the good kind, and the metallic, as you might guess, is a bit scratchy. Once I got down to stitching, it wasn't all bad. It is a bulky weight yarn, so it does work up pretty quickly. And for it being so fuzzy, you can still see your stitches. The fuzzy part of the yarn stays in place, filling any holes and gaps, while the metallic goes literally every which way. The whole thing holds its shape pretty well, and it does have some decent stretch. One major drawback is the care of this yarn. The ball band calls for hand washing and laying flat to dry. For a novelty yarn with barely any natural fiber, I just can't get why this yarn is so high maintenance. Miss Sparkle is just getting 4 out of 10 hooks for me. The pleasant crochet experience saved this from getting my lowest ranking ever, but just by a hair. This yarn is too weird and is too wacky. It'll make that perfect ugly Christmas sweater or a super gaudy holiday garland, but that's about as creative as I could get with something like this. It is ugly, it is obnoxious, but we can see what Hobbii was going for. There's a time and a place for yarn like this, and I guess the time is now. Shine on, Miss Sparkle. Shine on. Now there were some big hits and huge misses in this box, but that's the fun of Yarn Snob reviews, am I right? Make sure you drop down in the comments, let me know which yarns you loved, which you hated, and which you're making space for in your stash right now. I've got links to each of these yarns down in the description. And don't forget to suggest yarns and brands for me to try. I always love hearing your suggestions. A huge shout out to everyone who stopped me at Rhinebeck to say how much they loved my videos. It means the absolute world to me, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.